Today we'll be discussing the emergency fund. With me is my honored guest, Mr. Denny Mendez, our wealth management guide with nearly 20 years of experience on Wall Street, helping people financially. Today we expect to hear great nuggets from Mr. Mendez. And during this time of crises, we need clarity, certainly, around many things, and certainly our finances. Wouldn't you agree? My name is Angela Gibson, and I'm of Angie Speaks of Eve Speaks. Here we are dogged, determined, and deliberate to become the next best version of ourselves in every area of our lives. And so with that said, I must say welcome, Denny, and thank you again for taking the time to pay it forward to give people the clarity they need through this time of crisis.
Oh, my
How are
pleasure.
you doing?
Thank you. Doing all right. How are you feeling tonight?
I'm doing great. Just did my jump rope and I'm feeling, rejuvenated.
Ooh,
So let's
got the
dive
endorphins
right
running.
into it. We only have 30 minutes and I'm going to encourage everybody to go ahead and ask questions. But again, the focus is your emergency fund. And the big question I have today is, Mr. Mendez, why do we need an emergency fund? That's really important to ask why. I think it's important to ask yourself why in anything you do, really, because when
Yep.
you have your why, you really have perspective. I saw a quote
Yep.
recently. It says, when you find your why, you find your way. When you find your way, you find your will. And when you find your will, you find your wings. When we find our wings with our money, we are no longer stressed out. We can sleep at night. Our blood pressure goes down. All of that good stuff, right? So tell me,
That's it.
Mr. Mendez, why do we need to have an emergency fund?
Well, there's multiple reasons why you need one. Number one is actually just to have a peace of mind. But let's just bring up what's happening in the world today. If as long as you have not been living under a rock over the last 6 months, you have seen what's been going on in this world. You know, cities shut down, businesses shut down, businesses actually closing down. So if this isn't a testament as to why you should have an emergency fund for yourself and your family, I mean, I don't know what else can prove it more than what's going on right now. So
Right.
you definitely want to have an emergency fund. I mean, for peace of mind, number one, and to have protection for you and your family, because anything can happen. Listen, nobody ever thought a virus was going to come in and shut down literally the entire planet. But it did. It came. And if you were insulated, meaning you protected yourself and you were like, I did all the right moves financially, even if you might have taken a bit of a hit, at least you're like, hey, I have something here that can carry me and my family for the next couple of months or for the next couple of years, you know, depending on how well your savings are. But you definitely need to have one because it's a form of protection for yourself.
Okay. So we got the why down. Knowing our why
Yep.
is really important. Sleep, peace of mind is the main thing. Protection. But before we jump further into the emergency fund, let's back up a little bit and talk about the fact that we started a series talking about building the financial house.
Yeah.
And the first thing we talked about a few weeks ago was the idea that we must get out of debt and how there's good
Yeah.
debt and bad debt. Can we expound on that again before we dig deeper into the emergency fund? Just
Oh,
refresh
absolutely.
people.
Absolutely. So, you know, you hit it right on the head. It's like we're building our financial household. Whenever you build a house, you got to lay down the cement, you got to put up the pillars. And guess what? If you have 4 pillars up and one is a little shaky, you might not feel so comfortable building your house, you know, on top of that foundation there. So you got to make sure all the pillars are working and are strong and they're all, you know, working together. So as far as good debt versus bad debt, which is one of the things that we spoke about in the last series, is think of it this way. Good debt is something that you can go into debt, but it's going to bring you some sort of asset back. And what I mean by that is like it could be buying real estate. When you buy real estate, most people don't buy it cash. They go into debt. They'll go to the bank and say, hey, bank, loan me, you know, $500,000 because I'm going to buy this piece of real estate. And you may either live in it for yourself, which is fine because it's going to build some equity, or you might have it as an investment property. that is good debt because A, your credit is going to shoot up, and B, it's debt that, yes, you owe the bank some money, but it's an asset that's bringing you some income. So that's good debt. Bad debt is, hey, I have no money in the bank, but I really saw this Chanel bag that I love and I got to pick it up and it's $7,000. I'm going to use my credit card for it because I have enough credit on it. That's bad debt because not only are you going to swipe it and get that card, it's going to feel great walking out that store, but when you get that first bill, guess what? You're probably paying somewhere around 20% interest on that bag.
Whoa.
And that bag is not giving you any value. It makes you feel good, but it's not giving you any value as far as assets are concerned. It's not, you're not going to open it up and find cash in it. So that's good debt versus bad debt. Good debt brings you some asset. Bad debt, you're just spending it. It's a liability.
Okay. So let me ask this question. Would you say that people should have an emergency fund even when they're in debt?
Good question. So now let's assume it's credit card debt. Credit card debt is probably one of the worst debts to have because the rates are very high. If you miss 1 or 2 payments, your credit is going to go down 100 points, and it can actually it can be detrimental to your household. So let's use that example. Somebody has some debt and they have 0 emergency funds. Now you really have to take a look at your lifestyle. So you have to take a look at your life and say, man, what kind of car do I drive? Do I have every single channel on my cable box, plus Netflix, plus Hulu, plus, Amazon Prime? How much Amazon am I actually shopping every single month? All that good stuff. Because if you are living above your means, if you're bringing in $5,000 a month, but you're spending $5,500 a month, guess what? All you're doing is digging yourself deeper into that hole, and you're not going to be able to get out of it. Last thing you want to do is ever declare bankruptcy. So let's say you look at your household and you're like, man, you know what? I can cut here, I can cut there. Okay, I'm a little under. I'm spending $4,500. I'm bringing in $5,000. Guess what? Now you got $500 to play with. Now what we got to do is we may split it up. We may say, hey, half of that is going to go to debt because this debt is going to be a terrible monkey on your back. Half is going to go towards your savings. But guess what? You might be eating ramen noodles for the next 3 months because you need to build up that savings because it's protection for you. Think of it like you're driving a car and one of the wheels are loose, or it doesn't even have a wheel. So if you do not have an emergency fund, that's kind of how you're driving. You're driving with a very wiggly wheel. And that's going to, all you need is one little accident to take place for that wheel to go flying, and now you're stuck. So
what I'm hearing from you is that you need to have an emergency fund, even if you have debt. Is that what I heard?
That is correct. That is correct. Yes. So every person is different. So the real variable is going to be the individual. What kind of household are you living in? Are you living in a household where it's a single income with 2 children? Is it a 2-income household with no children? You have to kind of look at your lifestyle. Your lifestyle is going to determine how much should go towards the debt and how much should go towards this emergency fund. Do you have a very secure job? Are you a doctor in a hospital? You're a doctor, you're probably not going to lose your job. So it's a very safe bet that you can really focus on paying down your debt. Are you an entrepreneur? Are you an entrepreneur that's maybe owning a restaurant? And during this pandemic, restaurants are hurting. So you definitely want to start focusing more on, like, man, I got to build up some reserves and not focus so much on my debt. So your lifestyle is going to determine which route to go.
So speaking about this pandemic and the emergency fund, because, the idea of an emergency fund is to help you in an emergency. But in this, how does this help in this year? Like, how does the person who actually was responsible, who did have an emergency fund, deal with this drama that's going on?
Great question, right? So now let's take the pandemic for an example. We're in the middle of it right now. I mean, we're more than half a year in it already. So a lot of it depends on your lifestyle, right? So let's say you did everything right. This is a week before the pandemic hit. You've been hearing the news. Everybody in the news is saying, yeah, there's a virus going around and it's really dangerous, but nothing shut down. Nobody's saying anything about shutting anything down. Like, I got my little savings funds and I'm going to, continue going as normal. Next thing you know, a month later, everything shuts down. Sports shuts down. Let's say you were a hot dog vendor in the Barclays Center. Guess what? Now you have 0 income coming in because sports completely shut down. You could be a hot dog vendor in Central Park. Guess what? You're not getting any business because nobody's working. So your emergency fund comes in to protect your lifestyle. And when I say emergency fund, I really want you guys to focus on the fixed expenses of your lifestyle. Fixed expenses is like your rent or mortgage, is any, if you have a baby, maybe some diapers, maybe some formula, things that are absolute necessities. That is what your emergency fund should focus on. Not that you want to get a Lamborghini and you want to keep the car. That's not an emergency. It's all about your expenses. The fixed expenses, like I need this to survive. This is my minimum every single month to survive. Like I got to have a roof over my head. I got to make sure my kids are fed. And I got to make sure there's at least some sort of heat in the house. So you got to focus on those fixed expenses.
How many months of emergency fund should you have set aside?
Good question. So it depends on how risky you want to be, right? Some people put away 1 month, which I think is absolutely insane. I always recommend 6 months. 6 months is fairly conservative. It's not an easy feat to have because not everybody wants to save up 6 months of their income and to keep it in a bank account. Some people see that money and they're like, man, I really want to spend it. But if you have 6 months in there, I mean, 6 months is a very safe bet. If a pandemic hit like it did this time, and let's say the government did not come in and furlough all these, rents that you didn't have to pay, or the banks didn't come in and help people with their mortgages, and you had to pay no matter what, thank goodness you had an emergency fund. Because if you didn't, you're going to get hit with eviction notices and you're going to have a real bad issue on your hands. So this is for those things that happen. And it's not just a pandemic. Listen, a pandemic is not always going to happen, but it could be anything. It could be a medical emergency. It could be anything. Maybe you have a vehicle that had an issue. Maybe you got let go from your job. Maybe you got into some disability and you didn't have enough disability insurance. Now this emergency fund is going to help supplement your lifestyle until you get better. It's typically illnesses. Illnesses are one of the biggest things that hit households. Does that make sense?
So, yeah, that makes a lot of sense. When we're getting some clarity in this crisis, and we appreciate it, I certainly do. Where should people keep their emergency fund?
That is a question I get often. So people usually, if let's say you're a good saver, and you're like, man, I have my 6 months of savings. My lifestyle is whatever, $5,000 a month, 6 months. And listen, it's $30,000. A lot of people look at 30,000 and they're like, I don't want to keep it in the bank because the bank is not giving me any interest. It's almost laughable. I mean, it's downright offensive sometimes, where you have 30,000 in the bank and they're giving you $1.50 every 6 months. So I tell people this. I was like, listen, your emergency fund is just for that. It's for your emergency. It's not really for it to grow. It's not really for it to, double in money or anything like that. You don't want to put this at risk, because the last thing you want to do is let's take we're gonna take the pandemic as the example. Come March, let's say you had your $30,000 and you had it invested. You're like, I want to make money. The bank stinks. I want to put it into mutual funds. From February to March of this year, the market came down about 30%. It was the fastest drop in stock market history, which has happened just this year. So imagine if you were invested in February, your money goes down 30% in March, and then in March comes in and they shut everything down. They're like, all right, schools are closing, businesses are closing, you can no longer go to restaurants. And then come April, you got to start paying your bills. Or you get furloughed for whatever reason. And now you're like, hey, you got no income coming in, now you got to focus on your emergency fund. But guess what? You had invested. You're down 30%. So your $30,000 now is like $20,000. So, those are the things that I tell people, like, if you want to put it away, listen, just worry about somewhere that it's liquid and it's not at any risk. So listen, you can shop around money markets if you like, but again, the rates are absolutely laughable. So the
big
focus
thing
has
is
to be
not
liquidity.
taking a risk with your emergency fund. Don't expect to have it doubled. Don't try to get rich off of it. It's for exactly that, an emergency. So it needs stability. Is that what I'm hearing?
Yeah, that's it. Stability is the key. Stability and liquidity. Easy access to that money. That is key.
Stability and liquidity is key to your emergency fund's health.
That's right.
Okay. I think I asked this question already, but just refresh me again. How much should you save for your emergency fund? It's in proportion to your expenses?
It's proportionate to your fixed expenses. So again, you got fixed and variable expenses. So only worry about what you need to survive. Please do not include your hair budget. Please don't include your nail budget. Please don't include your barbershop budget. You don't need that. It's okay if your hair looks a little scruffy for a month or two. Because if you're dipping into your emergency fund, that means something's going on. So you're not really going to care so much about how your beer does. You want to care more about make sure your expenses are paid. If you do want to include it, hey, by all means, go ahead. But now you just, you have to save more. That's all.
Okay. So our financial house begins with getting out of debts, knowing the difference between the good debts and the bad debt. And number two, which is what we are on this week, is having an emergency fund. Now, with the reality that the emergency fund is probably run out by now, what do you tell your clients when they come to you? Because they did the right thing. They had their 6 months saved, right? But it doesn't matter now because 6 months, we're 10 months in, right? Or is it?
Yep. No, we're starting in March. We're basically October tomorrow. So let's call it 7 months.
Okay.
So if you had 6 months or 7 months of savings and you have not figured out what you're going to do with yourself for the last 6 months, I mean, that's also an issue. So what I've been telling my clients is that, I mean, that's the moment it hit, the moment that things were shutting down, and when sports shut down, that's when we knew it was serious. Because listen, the country is losing a lot of money when sports shut down, and when education shuts down, I mean, like, all right, now we're in trouble. So then we had to really start pivoting to figure out like what kind of job did you have, or what kind of business did you have? Did you have a business that was brick and mortar, like a restaurant? Then you hopefully you were focusing and maybe pivoting and not focusing on your business on people coming into your restaurant, but maybe you could focus on a delivery business. So it's all about adjusting
what
and
this idea
pivoting.
of pivoting means before you tell people to pivot, because it's so like an overused word these days. I'm not sure everybody knows what it means.
Okay.
Pivot.
So it's basically adjusting to the situation. That's really what it comes down to. So I'm going to use the restaurant as an example. So if you own the restaurant, they shut down restaurants. It means you could not walk into a restaurant and you couldn't sit down and enjoy a meal anymore. So if you're a restaurant owner and you have this brick and mortar place and you're spending all this, the expenses to keep the place open, you're still paying your waiters and everything. And if you do not have any clients coming in and that's your main focus, you're going to be in a really difficult situation because now you have no income. Your expenses are still staying the same. Maybe your expenses will go down a little bit if you let go of some servers, but your expenses are going to be pretty stable. And what happens is now you don't have the income coming in. So what you have to do is adjust your business model. You're like, all right, before it was people coming in, now I have to go to the people. Maybe I'm going to turn this into a delivery service. Maybe I'm going to figure out a way to go and reach out more people where they'll call me, say they love my food. Yes, you can't sit here and eat, but I'm going to bring it to you. And maybe you adjust yourself and make it a delivery service. So that way you your restaurant can continue going. It might not have made the same income, but at least you can keep yourself afloat. So there was a lot of people during this pandemic. Some people have done very poorly and some people have done very well because they adjusted. They were like, all right, I see what's going on over here. Everything is becoming technology based. Nobody wants to shake hands anymore. I need to really adjust my business model. And some people did and some people didn't. And what I was telling my clients is like, figure out what can be done in the next couple of months, because we don't know how long this is going to last. It's been 7 months so far. It could be another 7 months. Now we're talking about 1.5 years. Let's hope not. But
yeah, please, let's hope.
I want this to be over as soon as possible. But again, we just don't know. So you have to adjust. It's like what you and I are doing right now. We're not doing this in person. We're doing this via Zoom, and we're going to let this out to the world, whoever wants to listen, because we got to adjust. Now it's not about sitting in a community center and having people come in to sit. We adjusted our model. We have to put it ourselves, and now we're going to use the internet. The internet is a powerful tool. You just got to learn how to work it.
Work it. You got to work it. So this idea of pivoting takes intentionality and being deliberate. Pivoting, I call it pivoting on purpose. Because unless, right? Because if I realize that in my business, if I wait for things to get really bad, then I'll be scrambling. And I think that's where a lot of people have found themselves now. They're scrambling and they're full of anxiety and stress, and there's a lot of domestic violence and just child abuse because people weren't prepared.
The stress levels are high.
Yeah, it's very bad. And but even if you didn't anticipate that it would last this long. You're saying that even in the middle of it, we can decide to be resilient and
Yes.
pivot on purpose, adjust
Absolutely.
on purpose.
Always adjust on purpose. I always say, there's a saying that I say, like even in my business, right? Like, do we want to be reactive or do we want to be proactive, right? Reactive just means like, hey, we're going to wait for the punches to come to us, or we're going to try to duck it out the way. Or do we want to be proactive? Do we want to anticipate that something may happen and we're going to adjust ourselves for that anticipation? We're going to change ourselves ahead of time. So do we want to be reactive and just kind of wait and cower and kind of just, you know, duck the punches, or do we want to be proactive and actually go out there and do what is it that we want to do? I always say we want to be proactive. You want to go out there and figure out what's available to you.
I have a question that just popped into my head. What if you didn't have an emergency fund, but you have your 401k?
Okay.
Would you recommend that people go in there and get? I mean, I don't think they would have a choice if they could get out of their house.
Absolutely, absolutely. So the fantastic thing that happened, or, you know, one of the things that passed is when this pandemic hit. Listen, it's sad because in this country there's very little savings. People don't really save a lot of money. You know, some save and the majority do not, because they want to spend right at their lifestyle or more than their lifestyle. That's how they get into debt. But one thing that the government came in and said, hey, listen, if you guys have retirement plans, a 401k, an IRA, whatever kind of retirement plan, we're going to allow you to take the money out before you're 59 and a half. Because if you're 59 and a half, a year ago, if you take it out, you're going to have to pay a penalty. It's a 10% penalty on top of taxes that you have to pay for the very next year. Yeah, so if you're somebody that's under the age of, I'd like to say 60, just to round it up. If you're under the age of 60 and you take money out of your retirement plan, typically it's somewhere between 35 to 40% hit that you're taking on that money.
Really? 35 to 40%? Wow.
Yeah, 10% on penalties, and now you got to pay your taxes. You got to pay federal and you got to pay your state taxes. So what the government came in and said, hey, listen, I know a lot of people are hurting right now. So what we're going to do is we're going to allow you to take money out before the age of 60. We're going to waive the 10% penalty, so you don't have to pay the 10% penalty. And those taxes that you still have to pay, you're going to be allowed to pay that over a 3-year period. So you don't have to pay everything next year. You can pay it over a 3-year period. So they're giving you time to make those payments. So yes, if you do not have an emergency fund, you do have access to your retirement plan.
Well, that should be.
It's a lifeline. It's a lifeline.
Yeah, we all need a lifeline sometimes.
Yeah, you know,
That's
a lot
awesome.
of people have taken advantage of it.
Mm-hmm. That's good. Clarity in crisis. That's what we're talking about. Like, if you didn't know that, that's a good piece of information right there. The government will kind of turn their eyes away for 3 whole years and not give you a penalty. Oh, that's good.
Yep. You don't have to. Well, you don't pay the penalties. Will completely waived. I'm sorry. Go ahead.
You said it was completely waived for 3 years. Is that what you said?
Yeah. No. The penalty is waived forever. The taxes that you owe on it, that you have 3 years to pay.
Oh, okay. Yeah, guys, penalties waived forever. Santa Claus is here, but you have to pay the taxes.
Yeah. So don't go take money out of your retirement plan to go buy a purse. Again, don't do that.
So let me ask this question. You know, when I don't know what to ask, I ask everybody this question, all my clients. What question should I be asking you that I haven't asked so far that would be useful for our audience to know during this pandemic from a financial emergency fund perspective? Have I missed anything?
I think the topics usually come as we have conversations, but one of the questions I would probably ask is, why don't people have emergency funds? Even before the pandemic, like, why don't they have emergency funds? And
why don't you have an emergency fund?
The answer is, I would say, simple and complicated. Simple because, listen, we know why. People make more money, they want to spend it. That's all it's coming down to, right? They make more money, they want to spend it. The majority, listen, if you make money, what happens is you want to raise your lifestyle. Hey, I went from making $100,000 to $150,000. Hey, let me buy myself a nicer car. So what's happening is you're raising your lifestyle, but you're not putting anything in the bank. Oh, I'm making from 100,000 to, from 150 to 200. Man, let me get myself an even nicer car. So what happens is your expenses are still going up, but guess what? Now your emergency fund looks absolutely anemic. So what you got to do is you really have to be disciplined. listen, money's a tool, and I use this all the time. Money is just like a wrench. It's just like a knife. You got to use it what it's for. And since it's there for you to utilize it to either make more money or to make yourself comfortable, which route do you want to go?
And that's the mindset, right? To use the money that you do have to make more money instead of trying to spend it.
Absolutely.
It took me a long time to learn that. So
It's
yeah, I've
all
learned to
mindset.
pivot on purpose. And it's also very important to prepare on purpose. And what you're talking about is that when we don't have an emergency fund, we didn't prepare on purpose. It's one thing to pivot.
Oh,
It's
absolutely.
another thing also to prepare in advance. Because then if you don't, then again, that's another situation.
Listen, but best analogy for money, at least from my side, is always fitness. If you want to get in shape and you want to get abs, everybody knows what they got to do. It's not a secret. You got to work out, you got to run, you got to do your crunches, but you got to eat right. Eating right is hard because a lot of people like to eat, junk food, if you will. So eating right is hard, but we all know that's what we got to do. We know we got to eat our 4 to 5 meals a day. We know we got to keep our calories low, keep our fat low. We know that, but it's hard to do. That's why not everybody gets up at 5 o'clock in the morning to go running, because it's hard to do. But if you had the discipline to do it, the guys that have abs and the ladies that have abs, listen, they're working for that. It's not just like they were born with it one day. So they're working for that and they're disciplined. It's the same thing with money. Money is like, again, it's a tool. It's like your legs. All you want to do is you want to make sure to build it. Let's do a plan for it. Like you're meal prepping for a fitness. It's all about planning. And take it easy. Listen, if you stumble a little bit, don't be mad. If you had a bad meal, don't be upset about it. Just okay. The next one's going to be better, or learn from your mistakes.
But you must, so we can even pivot in our mindset right now in the middle of this crisis. So it's not just the money itself, but it's the mindset that probably needs the pivoting first so that we can start preparing, right?
It always starts in the mind. If you want to open up a restaurant, guess what? You just don't one day walk into the bank and say, I'm going to open up a restaurant. You think about it in your head. You write down some ideas. Man, these are the colors that I like. These are the foods that I like. It all starts in your mind. Same thing with your emergency fund. Oh, you know what? Okay, let me see how much are my expenses. Just do a little exercise. Let me write down my expenses. These are my fixed expenses. I'm spending $4,000 a month or whatever the number is. All right, I got to save, $300 a month for a couple of, months or years to get to my goal. But at least you're starting small. And once you start seeing that build up, you save it for like 3 months, 4 months, 5 months, and you see your account getting bigger and bigger. It's just going to motivate you to get there faster. Like, $300 a month, I think I could do $400 a month. Let me increase it a little bit because I want to get there quicker. Same thing with fitness. If you're working out for 2 months and you start seeing your clothes getting looser, your abs are starting to show a little bit, you're like, whew, when I go to the gym, I'm going to run even faster. It's the same exact thing.
Absolutely. Muscle. When you see the muscle, you get encouraged, right?
You get encouraged, and then when you see something bad, you don't want to eat a burger anymore. You're like, oh, I got these abs. It took me 17 years of crunches to get it.
Right. I need some abs myself, man. Jeez.
Yeah,
So
there you go.
Thank you so much for
my pleasure.
tonight. It's been 30 minutes actually. It's 9:45. We started at 9:15. So in terms of helping people, getting a discipline around building an emergency fund, what would you suggest? How can they reach you to help them with the mindset change that they need to start building, pivoting on purpose or preparing on purpose? How can they reach you?
Oh, absolutely. I'll give you my office number. It's always an easy way to reach me. You can reach me at 212-408-9585, or you can always find me on Instagram. I have an Instagram page, so you can find me. I'm Den Mendez. So it's basically Denny without the NY and my last name. So DenMendez.
Thank you, Denny. We're so much wiser and I have so much more clarity around an emergency fund tonight. And so I really hope that people reach out to you and really get the help they need. Here at Eve Speaks or Angie Speaks, we are so intentional about becoming the next best version of ourselves, and therefore we ask you to reach out to us because we can also help you with your personal development, that mindset shift that you need in different areas of your life, not just financial. You can reach me at Angela Speaks on Instagram or Angie Speaks on Facebook. Thank you once again and have a wonderful night. And thanks again, Denny. I'll catch you next
Thank
time.
you.
The next time we meet, we'll be talking about how to find extra income because we're still building the financial house. So
Okay,
guys,
that's
see
gonna
you
be fun.
next time. Thank you.
Take
Have
it
a good
easy.
night.